Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Kieran. I work at the University of Manchester, and I'm very pleased to welcome you today at this session, which is part of our Asia Careers Insight series, a series of employer webinars and workshops taking place throughout the month of March. I'm delighted to have here with me today Kate Farr from the University of Birmingham to give you a session on online assessment centres and answer any questions that you might have. Without any further delay, I'd like to hand over to Kate for her presentation, and just to let everyone know, we'll be taking questions at the end. Thank you.
Thank you, Kerry. Hi everyone, good afternoon, and welcome to my session on online assessment centres. I'm hoping the fact that you've all registered for this session means that you're feeling really positive about your job search, which is really good. So my name is Kate Farr. I'll move on to the next slide, bear with me, where I'll tell you a little bit more about myself. So I'm an employer liaison officer and I'm based at the University of Birmingham. I'm based at the moment within the business school. So I predominantly work with, at the moment, MBA and master's level students. I've worked at the university for 3 years now, across a number of different roles. And across that time, I've supported lots of students with their job applications, interview preparation. And before I joined the university, I actually worked for over 8 years in early careers recruitment for a large engineering and management consultancy. So I ran lots of assessment centres, I've interviewed lots of students, lots of graduates. So hopefully I can use my experience and my advice, you know, and kind of to get that across to you today to really help you with your preparation. I think what I'm going to do is switch off my webcam just while we're running the slides. So that you can see my slides properly. Okay, so in terms of what I'm going to cover within this session, I'm going to give you a few tips on how you can prepare for your online assessment centre. I'd say that probably the preparation isn't going to be too different really to how you would prepare for you know, an assessment centre kind of face to face. So we're going to go through how you can prepare on the day itself, how you can you know, really kind of present yourself in the best possible light, how you can keep those nerves under control. And then I'm going to talk about 3 kind of exercises that you might come across. I could talk for hours and hours about assessment centres, and obviously we can't cover it all within the session today, but I'm going to talk about those 3 exercises that I think, you know, are most commonly used. So the group exercise, a case study exercise or a written exercise, and the virtual interviews as well. And there'll be lots of time for questions at the end, so please make sure that you pop them in the chat or ask them at the end. Okay, so in terms of how to prepare for your assessment centre then, I've put at the very bottom of the slide there, but I think most importantly, be confident. You know, you've been invited to attend an assessment centre because the company that you've applied to think that you can do the job. They think that you've got the skills and you've got the ability to be able to do that job. So you should feel really, really confident about that day. You know, assessment centres, I think they're fantastic because it's giving you the opportunity to demonstrate your skills in a number of different exercises. And hopefully it's kind of the last hurdle that you have to jump through before potentially a job offer as well. So in order to prepare for that day, I think a really good place to start is to go back over the job description. So you've probably made lots of job applications, you know, so it's really important that you go back to that job description, make sure that you fully understand the role that you've applied to. Remind yourself of the skills that the company are looking for as well. You know, that should really shape the way that you prepare for that day. So, you know, each company is going to be looking for slightly different skills. So really look over what the skills that are important, the values that company has. So for example, you know, there might be a company who places a lot of emphasis on things like honesty and integrity. So make sure that you familiarise yourself with what's really important to that organisation. Research the organisation and the sector that they're in as well. Hopefully you've done some of that preparation already throughout, you know, your application, the application process itself. But I think, when it comes to the assessment centre stage, you really need to take that research just one step further. And when I say research, probably the smallest part of that research should take place on the company's website. There are lots of other places that you can find information about that company. So, for example, I think a really good place to get a feel for what a company is like is on their social media platforms. So take a look at those platforms. What kind of content does that company post? What does it tell you about the culture of the organisation? What does it tell you about what's currently happening at that company? Social media tends to be, the place that you go to find the most up-to-date information about a company. So take a look at those platforms. Take a look at, are there any recent articles about that company? What's happening there at the moment? Has the current situation with the pandemic really affected them? Are they in the news? Are there any journals that any employees have written? So really do that research and get underneath the skin of it, and take a look at the sector as well that company is in. Who are the company's competitors? Where does that company kind of sit within those competitors? How's the whole sector as a whole been affected by the pandemic? So this is going to take a bit of time to do, but I think the more preparation that you do beforehand, the more comfortable that you're going to feel on the day itself. So the next step is to kind of look back over your application, really know your CV inside out, become really comfortable with talking about yourself, which I know really doesn't come naturally to everybody. But kind of really get to grips with your experience and your strengths. Be an expert on yourself. Sounds really obvious, but read the joining instructions that the company has sent to you. That's information that is really valuable. They may tell you, what you can expect from the day. They might tell you a bit more about the exercises that you're going to be doing. There might be tasks that you have to prepare before the day itself. So the last thing you want to do is kind of read those instructions the night before the assessment centre and realise that you have a whole presentation to prepare, for example. It might tell you more about the dress code. It might tell you more about the platform that the company is using to run their assessment centre. If it's a platform that you're not familiar with, perhaps you can do a bit of research on it. Make sure that you've downloaded it to your device. Just make sure you're really, really prepared as you can be in advance. And as I mentioned before, just be confident. So on the day itself, how can you kind of present yourself in the best possible light? I know it's very easy for me to say, but try and be positive and remain positive across the whole of the day. Be friendly, be approachable. This is probably going to be a little bit trickier to do in a virtual environment as it would be if you were actually, visiting your company's office and being there in person. But you can still, you can still engage in conversation, make sure that you appear friendly, smile, even if inside you're really kind of really affected by your nerves. If you think that you've done badly on a particular exercise, then just try and move on from it. Try not to let it affect the rest of the day and the other exercises that you complete. Treat each exercise in isolation of each other. I kind of lost count of the number of times that I made offers to graduates, and they told me they completely failed because they'd done really badly in the interview, for example, or they'd done really badly on the written exercise. And actually, they hadn't done that badly at all. Or even if they had scored, lower on that exercise, it didn't rule them out. As I mentioned previously, the great thing about an assessment centre is that it's giving you lots of different opportunities to show your strengths. Recruiters know that everybody has strengths and weaknesses in different areas. So just try and make sure that you do your best in each exercise, but just understand that yes, of course you're going to have some exercises that come more naturally to you and that you find find easier. Make the most of any breaks that you have throughout the day as well. And remember that on that day, on the day of the assessment centre, that company is going to be trying to sell themselves to you as well. and they're going to probably be finding that really tricky, because doing that virtually is really quite tough. They can't invite you into their offices. They can't, get their employees down to lunch to chat to you. They can't give you an office tour. Some of those things can be done virtually, but it's not quite the same. So that company is really going to be trying themselves to you as well. So make the most of any breaks that you have. They may organise things like kind of short virtual coffee breaks where you might have the opportunity to talk to some current graduates or current employees. Make sure that you ask questions, that you find out everything that you want to know about that company as well, because that's really important. I always think it's important though to just be aware that even though you're told you're not assessed during these coffee breaks, it's only natural that the graduate that you're speaking to may well kind of form an opinion of you, and they may be asked to feed back to your assessors at the end of the day. So just kind of be on guard, and just make sure that you behave appropriately during those breaks as well. And just be interested, ask questions. The company may start the session with a company presentation to you, or a video. Kind of be interested, ask questions about that. When I used to run assessment centres, it was always really nice to see the graduates that actually, kind of got really involved in these kinds of things, and that asked questions, and it showed that they were really keen, and showed that they were enthusiastic. One thing that you might find difficult is finding somewhere quiet to sit during the assessment centre, but it's really important that you do try and find a quiet space. You might be in a house full of housemates, you might be at home with family, with your brothers and sisters, and see, can you bribe them to go out for a couple of hours? Can you encourage them to stay off their devices for a little while to make sure that your Wi-Fi connection is as strong as it possibly can be? Just do what you can. we know it, and the kind of the feedback that I've had from employers is that they completely appreciate that you may have technical issues, or that you might be kind of logging in from an environment that you wouldn't normally choose to do so. So try not to let it put you off. Okay, so the first exercise that I'm going to talk about is the group exercise. And I think this is the exercise that I tend to get most questions about, and that you might have most questions about, and that you might be most concerned about. I'd say that this is probably the exercise that is the trickiest to do virtually, because you really can't replicate, that sitting around a table with a group and kind of entering into a discussion. It is a bit different virtually, but there are things that you can do to make sure that you still come across well during the exercise itself. So as I put at the top there, above all else, you just need to make sure that you contribute in this exercise. So if you think about it from the company's point of view, that your assessors want you to do well at that assessment. So they really want you to do well. They're not trying to pick up on, they don't want to pick up on failures. They want you to pass, but they can only do that if you contribute in that exercise, and give them the evidence that they need to be able to say that you did demonstrate really good team working skills, or that you did demonstrate really good commercial awareness. So you need to make sure that you're contributing. Everything that you say and do is likely to be, written down, and it's going to be observed by an assessor. Have a think about what the company might be assessing. So think about the types of skills that they might be looking for. So it's going to be things probably like team working, leadership, and motivation. I'm going to touch on leadership again in just a second, because I think that's one area that tends to worry students. It's also about motivation and drive. How do you cope with situations where you're going to be put under pressure, put within a group of people that might have really different opinions to you? So always keep those in the back of your mind. It's probably less about the task itself that you're given, but it's how you interact with other people that's generally important. So think about the role that you usually take within a team as well. How can you play to your strengths? So when you're working within a group, Do you tend to be the person that generates the discussion? If there's any kind of awkward silences, are you the person that's kind of coming up with ideas and generating discussion between everybody? Are you really skilled at resolving conflict? Are you very good at kind of bringing in quieter members of the group? Think about the role that you'd normally take and think about how you can maybe, use those skills and those strengths within that group exercise. It's all about balance. So I've put there, be polite but confident. So it really is about getting that balance between the two. So you need to make sure that you are polite and that you acknowledge other people's ideas, and that you do listen to other people and that you kind of engage with the group. But you also need to be confident enough to put your own ideas across as well. Even if, that's really different to what the group has been talking about, make sure that you have the confidence to put your idea out there, but also be prepared to defend that idea as well. And when I say defend, it doesn't mean kind of in an aggressive way or, becoming defensive. It just means making sure that you can explain why you've come to that decision. But also being kind of mature enough to say, yeah, if the group don't agree that your approach isn't the best way, to say, yeah, that's fine, totally agree, let's go with the other idea. So it is about getting that balance. I think it's really nice in a group discussion if you can address people by their name, and I think that's probably one way that technology does help, because hopefully everyone's going to have their name on the screen. I think perhaps one area that might be trickier virtually is you're probably more likely to interrupt each other, because you can't pick up on those cues as if you were sitting together around a table. So you may well find that you interrupt each other a little more, but that happens, and it's okay. It's just a case of apologising, making sure that everybody has their opportunity to speak, and don't let it put you off. Make sure that you do get your ideas across. I've put there on the bottom, leadership isn't about being the loudest. Students used to say to me, surely the person that speaks the most in the group and that takes charge, they're the ones that come out with really good leadership skills, and that isn't always the case actually. Think about groups that you've been involved in. What kind of leader makes a good leader to you? What leaders have you had in the past that you've thought, you've really liked their leadership style? What is it about them that you've liked? I think to me, a good leader is somebody who involves all members of the group, who can, make sensible decisions if the group can't reach an agreement, or you're not managing to sort of achieve your objectives. A good leader is able to move people through those challenging situations, keeping the objectives in mind. So it is all about those other skills as well. It isn't just about, who can talk the loudest, or, who can talk the most. Okay, the next exercise that you might come across is a case study exercise. Now, case study exercises are generally designed to instruct you to read and analyse information or data, and then to summarise your findings either in writing or through individual or group discussions. So generally what happens is you're given a whole load of information, and you're given a very tight deadline, tight time frame in order to go through all of that information and then produce a written report, or perhaps you might be presenting that information to an assessor, or it might actually then form your group discussion. You're asked to then discuss it as a group. I think the best way to approach this type of exercise is a little bit like you'd approach an exam. It's all about picking out the key and the relevant information. Really think very carefully about what information do you actually need to be able to answer that question. You can't possibly read and analyse all of the information that you're given. Just try and really pick out the key areas, and plan your time as best as you can as well. So if you're given 45 minutes, for example, think about how much time do you need to read the information, how much time do you want to spend actually writing your report or noting down your ideas, and then how much time do you want to save to kind of look through everything and check your work. And when you then come to summarise your findings, think about your structure as well. So if it's a written report, you know, how would you normally produce a written report? You'd probably have an introduction, then you'd put together your findings, and then you'd have a conclusion at the end. And it's the same as if you were then going to have to present your information as a, you know, as a presentation. Think about how you'd want to structure that presentation. Okay, so virtual, more than likely you're going to come across virtual interviews. I could talk for hours and hours about virtual interviews, and obviously we haven't got the time to do that. So I'd just like to point out that there are 2 further sessions about interviews. There's a session on video interviews this Friday, I believe, and there's a session on preparing for interviews next Monday. So if you think you might need some more help on interviews, then make sure that you register and sign up for those sessions. So with virtual interview, you know, don't let the virtual environment put you off. You can display exactly the same kind of behaviours as you would if you were sat in front of your interview panel. So make sure that you've got really positive body language. That's really, really important, and that will be very obvious to your interviewers. You know, kind of sit up, make sure that you're looking at the screen, you know, kind of lean forward, maintain eye contact if you can, which I know might be a little tricky. Try not to be distracted. You know, perhaps you could actually film yourself speaking on a webcam and see how you come across, and see, you know, do you tend to look around the room a little bit? Like, I know, for example, for myself, you know, I'm quite animated when I'm presenting, and I use my hands a lot. So, you know, just take it account of all of the little things that you might do that might be a little bit distracting during the interview situation. There might be different types of interview questions that your interviewers will ask. They might tell you this beforehand as well, so you hopefully have a better idea of how you can prepare. I'd say probably the most common type of interview is a competency interview, although lots of employers are kind of moving more towards strengths-based interviewing, but competency interviews tend to be the most common, and this is where you're asked to provide examples of your past experience. You know, for this type of question, you can draw on every area of your life. It doesn't have to be work experience. So if you're worried that you don't have lots of work experience to talk about, think about the experience that you do have. You know, have you worked in, what have you done academically? What have you done throughout your course, which has helped you to develop your skills? What do you do, you know, extracurricular wise that help you? That could help you. So, you know, what teams are you part of? Are you part of any student societies? Have you done any voluntary work? Have you done any charity work? So make sure that you do draw on every area of your life. For a competency question, I always think it's really helpful to use the STAR technique to structure your response. If you're not familiar with that, you know, go and look at it. There's loads of information and examples on how to use that. That's a really good way of structuring your response. Sometimes in an interview situation, nerves really take over, and that's normal. But if you use the STAR technique and you've prepared using that technique, it will help to keep your answers on track, and it will help to keep you, help to keep your train of thought. So an example of a competency question is, you know, give me an example of where you've solved a complex problem. I'm sure if you contact your careers department, they will have lots and lots of examples that they can give you of competency questions, you know, that you can take a look through in order to kind of help you to prepare. So more and more companies now are using strengths or motivational type questions in an interview. Now these generally assess what you enjoy doing, what energizes you. They tend to be more quick fire questions, and they're probably slightly more difficult to prepare for, because you really have to answer them honestly, because you're talking about yourself. But they're questions like, you know, do you prefer starting tasks or finishing them? What would your friends say about you? What's your favourite subject? You know, what would you have done differently in this situation? So they're generally quicker questions, and they're trying to get you to answer a little more honestly, which is why employers like them. So as I say, it's slightly more difficult to prepare for, but keep in the back of your mind the company's values again, you know, skills that, you know, the company are really interested in. But again, you know, just try and answer honestly in the best way that you can. And then I've put difficult questions on there because I know that there are some questions that tend to crop up in interviews which do worry people. And I know a lot of people are worried about the "what are your weaknesses" question, and how you can go about answering that. But for that question, I always think, you know, you need to answer honestly because it's something that's quite personal to you. The employer is really trying to find out, you know, that whether you have that self-awareness that actually you don't do everything well and that you're not good at everything. And it's making sure that you recognise that you maybe do have weaknesses, and areas that you can develop and that you can improve. So think about, you know, sometimes I think it's helpful to think about your strengths, and then sometimes that brings up weaknesses. So for example, if you are a very enthusiastic person, you know, you kind of jump into things very quickly. Perhaps a weakness is that, you know, you sometimes you realise you need to take a step back and that you need to listen and that you need to read things and assess the situation properly. So try and think of it that way if you're struggling. Ideally, don't come up with something that, you know, is going to be really important in a role that you're applying to. So if you know that the role that you're applying to, you'd need to do lots of presentations and that you need to meet with clients. Probably best not to say that your weakness is presenting. Other difficult questions that you might come across are things like, if you were a biscuit, what biscuit would you be? I came across one recently, which was something like, you know, how many fish and chips are sold in the UK on a Friday evening? You know, those questions are really quite difficult, and there's no right answer to those. Again, I think it's just about how you approach that question and showing, you know, the logic behind how you've answered it. And just take your time. You know, it's completely fine to take a couple of minutes to answer a question like that. Okay, so just in summary then, we've touched on this already, but think about your body language. Think about where you're going to be sitting, you know, where you're going to be doing your assessment centre from. Try and maintain eye contact as much as you possibly can. You know, the more prepared you are, the more comfortable that you're going to feel on that day. The more research you've done, the more opportunities you're going to have to chat with your assessors, you know, and kind of make small talk, build up the rapport with them. Prepare some questions as well. Definitely, you know, at the end of an interview, you're more than likely going to have any questions for the interviewer. And I can't tell you how disappointing it is if at that point people say no. Make sure that you have a couple of really good questions to ask. Also, you know, it's your opportunity to ask questions and to kind of stop talking yourself for a minute, to take a step back, to relax, and actually find out information that you really want to know about that company as well, things that, you know, you haven't been able to find online. And above all else, you know, just be yourself. Just be the best version of yourself. But, you know, be yourself. And an assessment centre is as much the opportunity for you to find out about what that company's like as it is for them to test you and assess you as well. So that's the
Oh, sorry, Kate, I think we've lost you there for a second. Can you hear me?
Can you hear and see me, Kiri?
Hi, I can hear you now. I think we just like lost you there for just a few seconds. But yeah, thank you so much. Has been an excellent session. It was a good refresher for me as well. So just to remind the students, please put your questions in the chat area, and we'll get to those right now. Tell us about your own experiences of being at the assessment centers. What worries you the most? What unusual questions you might have been asked? And Kate will be very happy to answer them as they come in. We've had a question in, but I don't quite understand it. So maybe Kate, you can understand it a little bit better. How does an interview for a master's change? Oh, sorry, I think I understand it now. So how does an interview that you attend to for to be being allocated like a space on a master's course differs to an interview that is job related?
Well, that's a really good question. I'm not too familiar with the process, that universities use to interview students for a master's type program. I guess you would prepare in a similar way, but you'd be more focused on yourself and your own experience and your motivations for applying for that particular program. Do you think that's the right kind of along the right lines?
I think so. I also don't have a massive experience in admission, so I don't quite know how master's interviews work. But then, if you treat a master's like a different job role, then clearly for a master's, the person who's going to be hiring you in some way or like sort of like appointing you to that role will be looking for a different skill set. So I guess in an academic interview you'll be showcasing a lot more your academic achievements and then your research skills or your academic aptitude, that sort of thing. I think that would be sort of like my way of thinking at least.
Yeah.
A question here from a student asking, how would you suggest one prepares for a case study?
So a case study, I think perhaps with some employers they might give this sort of exercise in advance, or it may well be that they, kind of sit you there on the day and they present you with a whole load of information that you then have to read and analyse. So as I mentioned earlier, I think it's going to be about kind of planning your time and picking out relevant information. So I think in order to prepare for that before the day itself, perhaps you could start by kind of reading articles, reading journals, and actually trying to pick out like those key areas of information, perhaps kind of timing yourself to put together, to read a report and then come up with some findings and putting them together, jotting them down. I think kind of doing that under time pressure is probably good experience as well. And if anyone has exams coming up, that's good experience.
I was also going to add, stay on top of like current affairs, because from what I've noticed, a lot of it is on topical issues, but also there might be books out there that you can sort of like take out from the library to sort of like practice, to see what sort of like questions come up or what case study will even look like.
Yeah.
A student has asked if you can specify what's the difference between competency and strength-based assessment centers.
Yeah, so competency interviews tend to be asking you to provide an example of a time when you've done X. So give me an example of a time when you've worked in a team. Give me an example of a time when you demonstrated leadership. So they're asking you to provide one specific example of something that you've done within the past. Strengths-based is a little different. It's not asking you really to provide evidence of things you've done in the past. It's kind of assessing what you enjoy, how you learn, what energizes you. So it's just a slightly different style of questioning.
Yeah, which is based a little bit more on like what we call like positive psychology, an opportunity for you to talk about what you enjoy, to sort of like give a sense to the organization about how you fit in with them. So that's where those sort of like unusual questions might come in, as to how would your friends describe you, or what do you do in your free time, where there's really trying to get a sense of your personality traits rather than your specific skills. A couple of questions that are a little bit similar, so I'll try to summarize them into one. Is as we've got the pandemic happening right now, and not an abundance of like job roles actually being advertised, so a lot of the students are concerned about the lack of opportunity out there to build their professional experience. What are other things that students can do currently to build on that experience outside of getting a part-time job? And then how would you recommend they talk about these skills in a virtual interview or like in a virtual assessment center?
Yeah, I completely appreciate that you probably have less opportunities to develop those skills. Actually, I think what most universities, I know for Birmingham, we've we've still seen opportunities coming through in terms of virtual internships. Now that's an area that you probably haven't had the opportunity to work on that type of internship before, so it's developing a completely new skill set. So definitely speak to your careers department and see if there are opportunities to get involved in that type of internship. But as I said before, it isn't just about kind of work experience. It is about developing your skills in other ways as well. Particularly sort of volunteering at the moment. I think there are probably more volunteering opportunities around. How can you get involved in those? And are there kind of skill courses that you can do online? There are a few websites that do offer additional courses, things like LinkedIn Learning, to enable you to just expand your skill set. And it doesn't have to be something that's related to your degree. It can be something completely different. It just shows that you've got that aptitude to kind of continue learning.
Yeah, I will agree with you. Think volunteering, think extracurricular activities, sports. You've been involved in some of them, but hobbies. But also don't sort of like look down on any experience that you've had as part of your degree, group projects. I don't know, running your own YouTube channel. That sort of thing is also a very valid experience that you can translate into transferable skills. So one student is asking what do you think it will be better in a collaborative exercise to reach a consensus at the end, or it's completely fine if you don't?
Oh, that's a good question. I think generally with group exercises, you are sort of working towards a goal. So it might be kind of working on sort of putting some ideas together, but I would say it's not necessarily about all coming to the same agreement. It is fine to have differences of opinion, so long as you understand kind of when to stop and when to actually kind of take a step back and actually agree with your other team members. So long as you're completing the task that you're given, that's going to help shape your discussion. It doesn't matter if you have differences of opinion along the way, so long as you are sort of moving through those tasks and objectives that you've been given.
I don't know what's your experience, Kate, but from sort of like mock assessment centers I've attended in the past, students are a little bit conscious of disagreeing with each other, or like voicing their opinion, though you can see them a bit like fidgeting. So I wanted to like add that it's completely fine to say, actually, this is commend someone on like having a valid point by saying, I think this is a better way of going about it, and I think that's a good way of going. And if you can't read an agreement into how to go, again, it's completely fine to say, let's put it to a vote and then move on. Like, just don't spend a lot of time pondering over which is the right answer, and then getting a bit argumentative, because the whole point of the exercise is to show your collaboration. And if you do see quiet members of the team, I think will reflect really nicely on you to actually pause and say, X, Y, Z person, what do you think, and bring them into the conversation, because you're there to collaborate. And if the group performs strongly together, then it reflects better on you. So it's not an individual exercise. It's not about you overpowering the conversation.
Absolutely. And as you said, I think actually bringing in quieter members of the group is a leadership skill in itself, because you're recognizing that everybody should have a voice and have an input.
Another tough question, which again, I don't think there is a straight answer to this either, is how do you know what the company is interested in, and what sort of like interview they're offering you? So whether they're interested in specific skills, or how they will want you to sell yourself. And I think the question is, you don't know, you just prepare for anything, and that's what interviews are all about, to see how you think on your feet.
Yeah, and definitely. And I think some employers will give you lots of information. Some employers might say to you, even at the start of each exercise, they might say, okay, in this exercise we're assessing your team working skills and your commercial awareness. And some companies won't give you that information. All you can do is just prepare in the best way that you possibly can with the information that you're given, I think.
Yeah, I will agree with you. And and hopefully that will go well. I don't know again where Kate stands on this. there's always research and conversations you can have in advance, perhaps not directly with the employer, because to them it might, like, you know, reaching out to someone in the HR department, asking him questions about the recruitment center, that to some might be perceived as like cheating. But you can always ask people who have recently been that recruitment process themselves to give you an idea of how the assessment center was run in previous years, what sort of like questions were asked. I think that's completely fine, you know, trying to track down people on LinkedIn, or whether you know people in your course or friends who have been successfully appointed to a role. Is completely fine to reach out to them to gain that insight to help you prepare.
Yeah, and you know, use that as part of your preparation process. You know, remember that someone that you might speak to who's gone through the process previously, you know, the assessment centre might have changed since then, the company might have changed the exercises. So don't kind of put all of your eggs in one basket and just use everything that they say as gospel. You as Kiri said, you could try approaching the HR department to ask if they can give you any more information. But yeah, be mindful that they probably can't give you too much information because they need to be fair and consistent.
So a student is wondering, when it comes to putting slides together and doing a presentation for an organization, how would you recommend they format it? You know, like, how would you recommend they structure it?
A good question again. I think if you're asked to prepare a presentation in advance of the day, double check that you know that you're actually going to be able to produce slides, and that's how the company want you to present that information, because sometimes you might have other options available to you. You might actually not be able to use slides at all, so double check that. If you're going to be putting slides together, you know, you've probably watched many presentations now over the course of the last 12 months. You know, think about what captured your interest. You know, again, I think there's probably going to be some differences in terms of what the company prefers. You know, some people might prefer a slide that has got not too many words on it, not too much information. They might find that really off-putting. Some people are more drawn towards pictures and graphs. So you know, to some extent, you kind of have to come to terms with it yourself and put your own ideas across. But yeah, think about yourself. You know, what's really captured your imagination. And again, in terms of structure, it's always really good practice to have, you know, to introduce yourself, which a lot of people forget to do in a presentation, to have an agenda, and then to have some sort of summary or conclusion at the end as well.
Definitely. And then have a look at what Kay did today with the slides. You know, it was headline information on the slides, and then she just expanded on them. So not a lot of information on the slides, because then people will be too interested in reading and not listening to you. But also, you know, having all the key details there for someone to be able to refer back. And remember that communication is all about the 3 V's, as I like to call it. It's like voice, visual, and I've forgotten what the last one is. But essentially is, you know, it's less about what you say, but it's how you present it. So keep in mind, you know, your tonality, how you talk about it, how to make the sort of like topic engaging, and generally a lot of it comes down to your presentation style as well.
Yeah, definitely. I think I've seen presentations where people have had no slides and they're presented really well, and slides where they've had slides and they're presented really well. It is, I think the best thing you can do is know them off by heart, and so that you're not relying on notes. I think that's a really good idea.
So circling back to, you know, asking questions at the end, especially for those interview rounds that, you know, you've had repeatedly been through 2 or 3 different interview rounds. So the students are a bit concerned about what sort of questions can they ask after, you know, having met with these people for 2 or 3 times repeatedly, as a way of them not appearing as having not done their research into the company as well. Because I think sometimes there's that worry that, oh, if I ask something about the company that is implied, they will assume that you haven't researched them at all.
Yeah, that's a good point. You know, it's completely fine to say something like, you know, during my research, I found out this bit of information, and I was really interested in that. Can you give me your opinion on it, or can you give me your take on it? I think if you're really stuck, you know, people like to talk about themselves. So actually, to find out more about the culture of the company and why people enjoy working there, you could ask your interviewer, you know, what they've enjoyed most about working there, or maybe perhaps the project that they've most enjoyed being involved in, or maybe the project that they found most challenging, what's been the most complex area that they've worked in. It could be something that's really topical as well. If you're really not interested in Brexit, then maybe avoid that one, but it could be something that's topical. Could be something about how technology has changed the way they work. It might be something really personal to you as well, something like how will your performance be assessed, when you join the company.
Mm-hmm. Again, another student here is concerned about the case study, and what if you feel like your teammates or even yourself, are a bit lost, or they don't know what they're doing, or it's a very quiet group. Perhaps you can touch a little bit more about the roles that one can assume in a group exercise. Being the timekeeper, taking notes, that sort of thing. I think that might be useful.
Yeah, that's a good point actually. In my experience, what generally happens is everybody jumps in to try and be the timekeeper, because that's the one role that everybody kind of thinks of. But then what can happen is the person who said they'll be the timekeeper actually forgets, and then doesn't remind the group of the time, and completely forgets, and it all goes wrong. So don't worry if you don't jump in and be the timekeeper. There are other roles that you can take. It may be that you take the notes for the group. All I'd say is just be a little bit careful if you do take that role. Sometimes if you're taking the notes, it stops you from getting involved in the discussion. So maybe if you do take that role, perhaps you could do that for the first bit, and then someone else could take the next bit. But perhaps you think about your own strengths, as I mentioned before. Maybe you are a bit more of a task orientated person, so maybe you are the person that goes back to the brief all the time, keeps that discussion on track, and if the discussion is going off, bringing everybody back and saying, okay, we've covered these 2 points, but we haven't covered these yet. So there's that type of role as well. Maybe you're more of an ideas person, and you generate lots of ideas. You understand that actually not all of your ideas are going to be good, but you're generating that discussion. It is tricky if it's a quiet group, but just remember what I said. You do have to contribute. You do have to talk, and you do have to input.
Yeah, and as someone that has done assessment centers before, I think you really do appreciate the people who are in a quiet group, but they're a little bit more energetic, and they're trying to at least engage everyone else. I think the point I'd like to make is that my perception of virtual assessment centers in general has completely changed ever since I attended one on the other side, not as a participant, but as someone and sort of like assessing the candidates. So if you do have an opportunity of doing that yourself, either when it comes to student societies, hiring for like committee roles or that sort of thing, do take up the opportunity, because your perception will completely change, and then you'll suddenly start noticing things for you to improve at your next assessment center as well.
Yeah.
So just give me a quick second to go through the remaining questions, because we've been bombarded with so many of them. I'm sorry if I've missed any. If we can just sort of like summarize a little bit again about how to show your leadership in the interview. I think a lot of the students are interested in that specifically as well.
Yeah, in an interview or in the group discussion, do you think?
Oh, I've been told the student has specifically asked about the interview, but if we can say 1 or 2 like points for each, might be useful.
Yeah, okay. So for an interview, you may well be asked to give an example of a time where you've been the leader of a group. So it could be that it's a group project at university, and if you haven't had leadership experience, there is still time. There's still time to do that and to take the lead. Might be that you taking the lead of a particular aspect of a project. And just again, think about what makes a good leader. What do you look up to somebody to do? Is it somebody who is organised and who gets ideas from everybody in the group, who uses the ideas of everybody to achieve a goal? So really think about those opportunities that you've had to take the lead. If it's not of a group task of a specific area that you've been involved in. And then for the group discussion, as I mentioned, it isn't about kind of talking the most. I've seen lots of group discussions where somebody jumps in and sort of tries to take the lead because they feel like they should, but then as the discussion moves on, it turns out actually that somebody else becomes the leader, because they've maybe taken the time to actually look at the task itself and then really understand what the team are supposed to be doing. And they're the person who has involved the quieter members of the group, or they are the person who, when the group can't reach a decision and there's lots of differences of opinion, that they've taken a logical and a sensible approach to reach that decision, and to move the group forward. Or perhaps they're the person that, if you get questioned by the assessors, why have you come to this decision? How have you reached this decision? Perhaps you're the person who kind of stands up and really kind of promotes what the team have done and defends their ideas. So it's just getting that balance of sort of being confident, but making sure that you do appreciate everybody's opinions.
So very interesting. So that was the next question that a student had around, is it okay to discuss potential questions that might come up from the assessors? And I think it's completely fine as long as you don't spend too much time wondering what those questions might be and actually working on the group project. A student has asked how to best answer the perpetual question of why us? Why are you applying to this company specifically? Do you have any pointers on that?
I think this is an area that you really want to make it really personal to you. The worst thing you can do is just kind of recite information that is on the website. And again, this is a question actually that does throw a lot of people, because you prepare for lots of other things, but you don't always prepare for those initial questions like why us, why this role. So again, it is about, you should uncover this when you do your research. What is it about that particular company that really, really, really grabs your attention? What is it about that company that really aligns with your own personal values? Is it that the company have a big focus on corporate social responsibility, for example? Is it that the company is global, and you really want to collaborate with people from different cultures, from different countries? You want to use maybe previous experience that you've got. So really, again, try and make it as personal as you can. I use an example here. The company that I used to work for, I used to recruit aerospace engineers. And quite often students would talk about how when they were younger, they really loved aeroplanes, and that really captured their imagination, and they used to build model aeroplanes. And then and you can kind of see a bit of a story, a little bit of a journey, and it's really personal to them. And we always used to love hearing responses like that. And so just try and make it as personal to you as you can.
I think so. I think that's where your passion, and then you can get a little bit more like emotive. And if you're referring to, say, their values, for example, say why their values align to yours, or what piece of information you've read recently in the news that really interested you, or if you met with representatives from the organization before, say their names, say what you were discussed, like be specific about the why. And Kate, I'm wondering if you're aware of any websites or platforms where students can find virtual internships, though I know in the current climate now, everything is a bit in the air, whether it's virtual or not.
I mean, in my experience, we tend to have companies that sort of come to us directly, or we've worked with companies to set up virtual internships. So I think your careers department is probably a good port of call. I know if it's, I know Rate My Placement is a placement provider. Company, sorry, that they tend to advertise up the placement roles, and I believe they were advertising virtual internships. So just try some of the careers platforms that you'd normally go to, like Target Jobs, that sort of thing. They should have moved along with the times as well.
Yeah, I think it's important to be aware that you're more likely to find a virtual internship nowadays, especially for the forthcoming year as well. Organizations are still sticking to that format, just to be on the safe side, and because they realize that it works well, and it gives everyone the flexibility to apply and not being confined into a specific location or to a specific time zone. So one final question, because I'm very conscious of the time, is what final piece of advice do you have for the students who are attending virtual assessment centers and are missing the opportunity to showcase their interpersonal skills and generally their people skills by physically going into an assessment center. You know, they don't have the opportunity to introduce themselves, have that water cooler conversation with the recruitment team or anyone else. What else can they do to show that, you know, they are willing and they do have those sort of skills as well?
Yeah, that's a really good question, actually. I think, you know, every interaction that you have with a company builds up a picture of who you are as a person. So, you know, even as far as the emails that you might get sent from the recruitment team before the assessment centre, you know, it just takes a couple of minutes to respond and say, thank you for this information, you know, really looking forward to the day. Again, that's the kind of starts to build up this positive impression of you. It is tricky virtually, there's no doubt about it, but just use those opportunities, every opportunity you can, to make sure that you engage with people. You know, even if it's with the other candidates that are there on the day, if you're in a breakout room, for example, and you're given sort of 10 minutes just to kind of relax and to chat, you know, these people might actually end up being your colleagues as well. So, you know, just try and be interested throughout the day, ask questions. At the end of the day, you know, perhaps you could send an email to the recruitment team again. It's not going to make a difference to the decision, but what it will do is it will, you know, put you in that really sort of positive light.
I think so. I will agree. It's all about trying to increase your visibility in any way that you can, from sending a quick thank you note, you know, in the chat area of the virtual assessment center, to following up with a thank you email. It just really makes them remember your name and a face perhaps. And, you know, it won't necessarily give you the job, but then it will build a more positive impression of yourselves. So I think that's all the time we've had today and all the questions we've had as well. So thank you very much, Kate. It's been a very insightful and helpful presentation today. I've certainly learned loads, and I'm sorry for like keep pushing like very difficult questions your way as well.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
It's very stretching, but very still very insightful. So I hope the students learn loads as well. Please remember to sign up to more sessions. You'll find all of our upcoming sessions on our Asia Careers Insights series website. This session is being recorded, so we'll circulate the recording to you in the next few hours today, so you can revisit it even if you want to revisit the slides as well. And then once again, I'd really like to thank Kate and the University of Birmingham for participating in this session and offering their knowledge today for everyone to benefit from.
Thank you. Thanks, Corinne.
Thank you. Have a good afternoon, and we look forward to seeing you again soon at future sessions.